When Victoria Vance slid the divorce papers across the table toward me, her new assistant, barely promoted, leaned against the doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips, completely undisguised. His eyes sized me up like a piece of old furniture about to be kicked to the curb, a look of condescending finality mixed with impatient haste. The light from the overhead fixture was sterile and harsh, casting sharp, boardroom-like angles on Victoria's impeccably maintained face. What she had pinned under her fingertips wasn't just a few sheets of paper, but a certificate of sale for the last 2 years of my marriage, a cashier's check for $2 million. Sign it. Victoria's voice was flat, as if finalizing a routine contract clause. She tapped a manicured nail on the check, making a faint clicking sound. It's time to make things official with him. And this, she added, her gaze finally flicking toward me, is more than enough for you to go back to that little town of yours and live comfortably for the rest of your life. She didn't even really look at me, her focus returning to the papers as if confirming a trivial number. The air was thick with the lingering cold notes of her expensive perfume, mingling with the deliberately ostentatious cologne of the young man at the door. It was the scent of victory. I leaned back into the sofa, my gaze drifting from Victoria's indifferent profile to the unabashed triumph on the young man's face, finally settling on the papers and the check. $2 million. 2 years. A generous monthly stipend. A pure return on investment. Not bad. A small smile touched my lips, so faint I was probably the only one who noticed. Pen, I said. Victoria seemed surprised by my swift compliance. Her tapping finger paused for a fraction of a second as she glanced up. A flicker of something like, "At least you know what's good for you," crossed her eyes before they reverted to their usual business-like detachment. She jutted her chin toward the door. The assistant immediately straightened up, his face breaking into an obsequious grin. He strode over, pulled a Mont-Blanc pen from the inner pocket of his ridiculously expensive suit, and held it out to me. The gesture dripped with condescension, like an offering to the poor. I took it without looking at him. The cool metal met my fingertips. I flipped the agreement straight to the final page. The signature line was empty, waiting for my name to end this 2-year-long farce that was more a business arrangement than a marriage. Victoria's signature was already there, a confident, powerful flourish that embodied her need for control. The nib scratched softly against the paper. I signed my name quickly, steadily. The last stroke was done. The dust had settled. Victoria seemed to let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, the tense line of her jaw softening slightly. She took the papers, verified my signature, and then pushed the check toward me. I folded it and stuffed it casually into my jeans pocket. The paper was light, almost weightless, yet it was a heavy, tangible marker of a newfound freedom. Tori, the assistant, cooed, instantly plastering himself to her side, his arms sliding around her waist with practiced ease. His voice was sickeningly sweet. "All taken care of? Are you tired? I booked us that chef's table at Sushi Nakazawa for tonight." Victoria didn't push him away. She just gave a faint and let him half embrace her as they walked toward the stairs, not sparing me another glance. The sharp clicks of her heels on the marble staircase echoed, crisp and hollow, each step taking her further away from this home she had never truly inhabited. I sat motionless on the sofa, listening to their footsteps ascend, the faint sounds of their flirtatious chatter drifting down, followed by the soft click of the master bedroom door closing. The enormous living room was suddenly mine alone, filled with a cold, expensive silence. The overhead light was still blinding, making the imported Italian furniture and the abstract paintings on the walls shimmer with an unreal, alienating gloss. This place had never felt like a home. It was more like a luxury hotel suite, and I was just a long-term guest whose lease had finally expired. I stood up. I didn't turn on any more lights, navigating by the glow of the city's neon signs filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I knew my way to the first-floor guest room, my room, by heart. My bags were already packed, sitting at the foot of the bed. It was just one large hiking backpack. Inside were a few changes of comfortable clothes, a couple of books, a laptop, and a worn old wallet I'd had for years. The things that were actually mine were pathetically few. The designer clothes, watches, and accessories Victoria had her people send over regularly remained untouched in the walk-in closet. They belonged to this space, not to me. I unzipped the innermost pocket of the backpack and tucked the folded check inside, next to a faded photograph. It was a picture of my parents standing in front of our old house, their smiles gentle. The cold, crisp edge of the check pressed against the warmth of the photo, a strange contrast. I shouldered the pack and opened the door. The living room was still empty and silent. I gave his gilded cage one last look, felt not a single pang of nostalgia, and walked out. The heavy security door clicked shut behind me, a dull, final thud that sealed that world away for good. The late autumn night air hit me with a biting chill, scattering the last traces of perfume that clung to my clothes. I took a deep breath of the cold, crisp air, and it felt like it cleared my lungs. I pulled out my phone. The Uber I'd called arrived in minutes. The driver was a quiet, middle-aged man. Seeing my large backpack, he asked casually, "Catching a train, kid?" "Yep," I said, getting into the back and setting the pack beside me. Penn Station. The car merged into the ceaseless flow of late-night traffic. Outside the window, the glittering cityscape blurred and receded. The skyscrapers, silhouetted against the night, looked like dormant beasts. This was Victoria's world, a world of ambition, speed, and cold, hard rules. I had only ever been a tourist at its edge. My phone screen lit up. It was a message on Instagram from Victoria's assistant. I opened it. It was just a photo. In it, he and Victoria were squeezed into a booth at some dimly lit, trendy bar. His arm was slung around her shoulder as he flashed a tacky peace sign at the camera, his face a mask of blatant gloating and provocation. Below it, a line of text. "Thanks for making it easy, Leo. Tori and I are going to be so happy. You go enjoy your retirement." The lighting was dim, but the relaxed, almost indulgent smile on Victoria's face was perfectly clear. It was an expression I had never once seen on her. With me, she had always been performing a serious contractual obligation, efficient, precise, devoid of any extraneous emotion. I stared at the photo, feeling no anger, no jealousy, just the quiet calm of finality. It was almost funny. My thumb hovered over the screen for a moment. I didn't reply. I didn't even delete the conversation. Instead, I opened my contacts, found the name Victoria Vance, long pressed it, and hit delete. The action was clean, without a shred of hesitation. After that, I shoved my phone back in my pocket, leaned my head against the cool glass of the window, and closed my eyes. The world went quiet, leaving only the monotonous hum of the tires on the pavement, a hypnotic, rhythmic beat. Penn Station was ablaze with light, still bustling with people even late at night. Red text scrolled relentlessly across the giant departure board. I got my ticket and walked into the waiting area with my pack. The air was a mix of greasy smells from fast food joints, the chemical tang of disinfectant, and the weary scent of countless travelers. A woman's crisp, clear voice announced train information over the PA system. I found a seat in a corner and set my backpack at my feet. The phone in my pocket vibrated again. I pulled it out. It was a text alert from my bank. My personal account had just received a transfer of $2 million. The transaction memo contained a single, cold word, severance. Staring at that long string of zeros, a strange feeling began to build. It wasn't elation, but rather the profound relief of a heavy burden finally being lifted. This check, along with the monthly stipends Victoria had deposited over the past 2 years, and the returns from the careful investment of my parents' settlement money, was my ticket to freedom. It all sat there silently, a solid foundation paving the road to a future I had planned long ago. Ding dong! Attention passengers, the Amtrak Northeast Regional train to Vermont is now boarding. I stood up, shouldered my heavy pack, and merged with the crowd heading for the gate. I passed through the turnstile, walked down the long platform, and finally stepped onto the train. I found my window seat. Outside, the platform was brightly lit, filled with figures hurrying along, dragging suitcases. The train began to move, smoothly accelerating. The platform lights shrank and receded, eventually replaced by an endless darkness dotted with the sparse lights of the distant city. The window reflected my own vague image, calm, even relaxed, a look of profound relief on my face. I placed the backpack on my lap, unzipped it, and double-checked that the check and my parents' photo were still there. My fingertips brushed the edge of the photo, and I felt a flicker of warmth. Then, from a side pocket, I pulled out something else, a small palm-sized soft leather notebook, its edges frayed from years of use. The cover was plain dark brown leather. I opened it. Inside was my parents' handwriting, neat and clear. It wasn't a diary. It was more like an incredibly simple yet precise guide to life. The first half was a detailed record of their household finances, down to the last cent. Every dollar earned, every dollar spent, even the price of a pound of green beans was noted. The second half contained the practical, even ruthlessly sharp, investment tips and wisdom they had accumulated over a lifetime. How to tell if a project was solid. How to read people. By looking at their eyes, their hands, the way they talked about their goals, whether it was hot air or real substance. How to stay calm during market fluctuations. How to calculate the balance between risk and reward. The language was plain, with no lofty theories, just the raw street smarts of survival. They were no Wall Street titans, just two ordinary people who had worked diligently their whole lives in a small town. This notebook was their humble attempt to leave me, their only son, a means of survival. It was the starting point, the foundation of all my investments. Without it, I wouldn't have had the money to help Sarah, let alone the funds to make that crucial angel investment in Victoria. My fingers traced the familiar script, those simple proverbs about reading people, and it was as if I could feel my parents' warmth. Victoria, Sarah, two completely different faces flashed through my mind. Victoria, back then, had sat across from me, looking gaunt and exhausted, but her eyes were like embers refusing to die out in a pile of ash. When she spoke of her failure, her voice was terrifyingly calm, filled not with complaints, but with analysis and reflection. And Sarah, my memory snapped back years ago. It was a sweltering September afternoon, the sun a blinding white glare. In the little diner behind the university, run by a kind woman named Maria, an old ceiling fan uselessly churned thick, heavy air. I had just finished my first day of freshman classes and was sitting at my usual corner table, my calculus textbook open. My pen scratched across the paper, but my mind was drifting. After my parents passed, this small diner and the settlement money in my bank account had become my entire world. The glass doors swung open, letting in a gust of even hotter air. A hesitant figure stepped inside. I looked up instinctively. It was a girl. She wasn't tall, and so thin it seemed the breeze from the door could knock her over. She wore a faded old t-shirt, equally worn-out jeans, and a pair of white canvas sneakers that had been scrubbed to a pale gray. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, a few stray strands plastered to her temples with sweat. Her face was pale, her lips chapped, but her eyes were incredibly bright, carrying a kind of cautious determination and an undeniable nervousness. She stood at the entrance, her gaze quickly scanning the small diner, as if looking for something. Finally, her eyes landed on Maria, who was behind the counter wiping plates. The girl took a deep breath, as if summoning all her courage, and walked over. Her steps were light, almost timid. "Ma'am." Her voice was quiet, with a soft, melodic accent, but clear. "Excuse me, are you still hiring?" As she asked, her fingers twisted the hem of her faded t-shirt, her knuckles white from the pressure. Her eyes were cast downward, not daring to meet Maria's. Maria stopped wiping, looked up, and sized her up. The diner was empty, filled only with the monotonous hum of the fan. "We are," Maria said, her voice having the no-nonsense briskness of a local. "But it's hard work. Bussing tables, washing dishes, wiping things down. When it gets busy, you don't stop moving. Pays hourly, not great, but it comes with dinner. You think you can handle it?" The girl's head bobbed up and down like a pecking chicken, the hope in her bright eyes flaring to life. "Yes, ma'am, I can do anything. I'm not afraid of hard work." Her tone was so eager, it was almost desperate. "You look young, kid." "Freshman?" Maria asked, leaning against the counter. "Yes, ma'am. First year," the girl answered softly, her head ducking down again. "What about your family? They okay with you working? School just started." The girl went silent for a moment. The hand twisting her shirt clenched even tighter, the knuckles a stark white. After a few seconds, she spoke in a voice that was even quieter, even softer. "My tuition. I earned it myself this summer. My bus fare, too. She didn't say whether her family approved, but the answer was clear. Maria sighed, her expression softening. She was about to say something when I closed my textbook, stood up, and walked over. Maria. I reached the counter, my eyes on the thin girl. She tensed as I approached, her head bowing lower, showing me only a tight, anxious profile. Leo, Maria said, looking at me. Take a look. I nodded and spoke directly to the girl. What's your major? Your name. She looked up, as if startled, her bright eyes meeting mine, filled with surprise, nervousness, and a faint, almost imperceptible defensiveness. Computer science. Sarah Jenkins. Her voice was soft, but she enunciated clearly. Sarah Jenkins. I repeated her name, my tone neutral. The work here is tough, but Maria's a good person. Come by after your classes if you have time. You'll get paid on time, and dinner's included. My tone was matter-of-fact, as if stating the most ordinary thing in the world. Sarah stared, her bright eyes wide with disbelief. She looked from me to Maria, as if she couldn't understand how it was all settled so suddenly. Maria immediately broke into a smile and clapped her hands. All right, kid, you're hired. Can you start today? It's quiet now, a good time to get the hang of things. An overwhelming wave of joy washed over Sarah's face. A rush of color flooded her pale cheeks, and her eyes shone with an astonishing brilliance. She nodded eagerly. Yes, I can. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you, She looked at me, her eyes brimming with a pure, overflowing gratitude. I just nodded, said nothing more, and returned to my corner table, reopening my calculus book. From the corner of my eye, I saw Maria showing Sarah around, telling her where the rags were, the dish soap, how to stack the plates. Sarah listened with intense concentration, nodding constantly, her movements filled with a careful reverence, as if she'd been granted the greatest gift in the world. Outside, the cicadas buzzed. The old fan droned on. My pen returned to the paper, working through a complex equation, but my mind felt a little more settled than before. This investment, it seemed, had low risk, and the return was probably getting to see a hardworking person have a slightly easier time. The gentle rocking of the train pulled me back to the present. Outside the window, blurry fields and the lights of small towns flew by. I put the notebook, heavy with the past, back into the depths of my backpack. My body sank into the soft seat, and the exhaustion of the long journey finally washed over me. My eyelids grew heavy. My last thought before drifting off was, almost there. I'm almost home. That place with just a few small rooms, a little yard where I could plant some vegetables and go fishing. The clatter of wheels on the track went on for an unknown amount of time, until a clear female voice cut through my hazy sleep. Our next stop is Riverbend Creek. Passengers for Riverbend Creek, please prepare for arrival. Riverbend Creek. The name was like a magic spell, instantly chasing away all fatigue. I shot upright, my eyes wide open. Outside the window, the sky was the distinct gray of a late autumn dawn, the morning light not yet strong enough to pierce the thick clouds. The outline of an old-fashioned station platform emerged from the mist, the words Riverbend Creek, in bold red letters, standing out against the pale background. Even the air felt different, carrying the clean, sharp scent of soil and damp leaves, a world away from the city's mix of exhaust fumes and concrete. I shouldered my heavy pack and followed the sparse trickle of passengers off the train. A cold wind hit me, damp and biting but invigorating. The little Riverbend Creek station was old, its facilities simple, with only a handful of staff. Outside the station was a small square where a few beat-up pickup trucks waited for fares. The drivers, bundled in thick coats, stood with their hands in their pockets, their eyes giving me a casual once-over. Hey, you headed to Little River Hollow? I asked the nearest one. The driver was an old man with a shock of white hair. He looked me over, probably noting my big pack, but also catching the local cadence of my accent. He nodded and named his price. $20. Deal. I opened the door and climbed in. The cab smelled of cheap tobacco and motor oil. The leather on the seats cracked and worn. The truck sputtered to life, belching a cloud of black smoke as it rattled out of the station square and onto a potholed county road. On either side of the road were harvested fields, exposing the bare brown earth. In the distance, Rolling hills were painted with the mottled colors of late fall, a tapestry of red, yellow, and green, like a watercolor painting bleeding in the morning mist. The air was cold and clean, filling my lungs with the faint, earthy smell of the soil and the sweet scent of vegetation. Occasionally, we'd pass a small village, where I could see smoke curling up from the chimneys of early risers, punctuated by the sound of a dog barking or a rooster crowing. A long-forgotten sense of peace slowly seeped into my limbs. The alienation and coldness of the past 2 years in that massive city, in that luxurious apartment, felt like an invisible shell being peeled away, piece by piece, by this country wind. The pickup bounced along for nearly an hour before stopping at a fork in the road. "This is Little River Hollow. Road gets too narrow for me to go any further," the old man said, pointing to a smaller dirt track. I paid him and shouldered my pack. I stepped onto the familiar, yet unfamiliar, dirt road. On both sides were the stubbled remains of rice paddies, with stubborn weeds along the banks, still holding onto glittering flecks of frost. After walking for about 15 minutes, my boots sinking into the soft earth, I rounded a small pond, and the outline of a few tile roof houses finally became clear in the mist. A low stone wall, a mottled wooden gate, left slightly ajar. When I pushed it open, the hinges let out a long, familiar groan, like an old friend greeting a long-lost master. The small yard was empty, a pile of rotting farm tools in one corner, the ground littered with dead leaves. The 3 rooms of the house faced the gate, some of their roof tiles broken, the window panes coated in a thick layer of dust that reflected the gray-white sky. This was the old house my parents had left me. It stood there silently, bearing the marks of time's erosion, but also radiating a heavy, grounding sense of belonging. I dropped my backpack in the middle of the yard and looked around. The old persimmon tree in the corner was still there, its leaves all gone, leaving only a few bright red fruits hanging stubbornly from the branches like tiny lanterns. The iron handle of the water pump beneath, it was covered in rust. A wave of warmth, almost painful, washed over me. I was back. I was really back. The days that followed felt like they were in slow motion. Life became simple, tangible, filled with the smell of earth and sunlight. The first order of business was cleaning. A broom sweeping across the dusty, leaf-strewn floor raised a cloud of choking dust. I pumped water from the well and wiped down the grimy windows and furniture again and again. When sunlight finally streamed into the main room, the whole house seemed to come alive, filled with an old but clean scent. The plaster was peeling in some spots, revealing the yellow mud underneath. The roof leaked in a few places. I bought some tar paper and tiles, borrowed a ladder, and clumsily climbed up to patch it. I got blisters on my hands and my back ached, but looking at the repaired roof, I felt a deep, satisfying contentment. Cleaning the yard was an even bigger project. The weeds were nearly knee-high. I bought a hoe and spent several days clearing them out, turning over the hard, compacted soil. My neighbor, Brenda, saw me working alone and enthusiastically brought over some vegetable seedlings, scallions, garlic sprouts, a few young bok choy, and a small packet of radish seeds. "Leo, it's good to have you back, real good." Brenda's voice was loud and cheerful, her wrinkled face beaming with a simple, honest smile. "This house has been empty for too long. It's good to have life in it again. Planting a garden is a great idea. Nothing better than eating what you grow. If you need a hand with anything, you just let me know." "Thanks, Brenda." I took the seedlings and seeds, a warmth spreading through my chest. With Brenda's guidance, I cleared a small patch for a garden in a sunny corner of the yard. I learned to level the soil, dig shallow furrows, and carefully plant the seedlings before watering them. Watching those tender green shoots stand tall in the late autumn sun, a strange joy bloomed inside me. So this is what it felt like to help life take root and grow. The days slipped by. I was woken by birdsong, not an alarm clock. After a simple breakfast, I'd sometimes go out to the garden to pull weeds or water the plants. Other times, I'd just sit on a stool in the yard, soaking up the sun, reading a book, or doing nothing at all, just watching the clouds drift by. In the afternoons, I might take a simple fishing rod down to the small river behind the village and sit for hours. The river was shallow, the fish small, and catching anything was a matter of luck, but the quiet peace of waiting was enough. The $2 million check from Victoria had long been cashed and deposited, joining the previous monthly payments and the returns from my parents' wisely invested settlement. It was all just a series of quiet numbers in a bank account now. They were vast but silent, no longer requiring my active management beyond a periodic check of the conservative investment reports. They were the solid guarantee for my peaceful life, the foundation that gave me the confidence to be completely idle. I even started doing the math. My daily expenses were minimal. I grew my own vegetables and occasionally bought rice, flour, and meat. There are utility bills. The biggest expense would probably be coal for heating in the winter. The interest alone from the money in my account was enough for me to live like this for several lifetimes. This realization brought a deep, almost lazy sense of security. Occasionally, people would show up at my door. Usually distant relatives I barely knew or casual acquaintances of my parents. They'd come with a mix of curiosity and probing questions, beating around the bush to find out why I'd suddenly come back after striking it rich in the city, or subtly asking if I had any spare cash or good opportunities to share. I would always just smile, offer them a cup of simple tea, and say casually, "Rich? Nah, couldn't make it in the big city. Just came back to farm a little, enjoy the quiet." Then I'd change the subject, asking about this year's harvest or which kid in the village got into college. Seeing that they were getting nowhere, the eagerness in their eyes would cool, and they'd eventually leave, looking disappointed. The yard gate would close, shutting out their prying, and the little yard would return to its peace. This quiet was like a warm cocoon, wrapping me in its embrace. Time seemed to lose its markers, flowing slowly with the rising and setting of the sun, the life and death of the plants. I thought this was how my life would be, flowing silently and peacefully like the river in front of my house, all the way to the end. Until that evening. The setting sun was a molten gold, setting the western sky ablaze. I had just finished watering the garden and was squatting by the well, washing my hands. The late autumn well water was bone-chillingly cold. Suddenly, the roar of an engine grew closer, brutally tearing through the village's tranquility. The sound was aggressive, powerful, imbued with a modern speed and force that was completely out of place in this rural setting. It came to a screeching halt right outside my mottled wooden gate. Then a loud bang. It wasn't a knock. It was a kick. A solid, forceful kick. The impact was so strong that the entire old wooden gate shuddered violently. The hinges groaned in protest, and years of accumulated dust rained down from the gate panels. I shot to my feet, forgetting to even dry my wet hands, and stared at the gate in disbelief. Who would do that? A neighbor? Impossible. Brenda and the others would call out my name from distance. The utility guy? Even less likely. Before I could even walk over, after another, even heavier bang, the weathered wooden gate was actually kicked clean open. The gate panel slammed against the stone wall behind it, then bounced back, hanging crookedly from its frame, looking like it could fall apart at any moment. A figure, wrapped in a strong scent of alcohol, stormed in like a whirlwind, nearly getting hit by the rebounding gate. The last rays of the setting sun hit her full on. She was tall, dressed in a sharply tailored, high-quality cream-colored trench coat over a matching cashmere sweater. Her long hair was fashionably curled and dyed a deep chestnut brown. Her makeup was exquisite, her features perfectly defined even in the twilight. But right now, her beautiful, almost aggressive face was flushed, her eyes hazy yet sharp, as if veiled in mist but burning with two small flames. She was clutching a designer handbag, swinging it carelessly with her unsteady steps. The strong smell of alcohol, mixed with a cold, expensive perfume, hit me. I froze, the blood in my veins turning to ice. My mind went blank for a second before I managed to force out two words. Sarah. The Sarah standing before me was almost impossible to reconcile with the memory of the thin girl in a faded t-shirt, carefully wiping tables in the diner, or the focused graduate student in a white lab coat. Time had left its heavy, colorful mark on her, sharpening her into a dazzling, formidable presence. The only familiar thing was the stubborn, burning fire in her eyes. Only now it was fiercer and far more complicated. She steadied herself, squinting her drunken yet incredibly bright eyes, and looked me up and down. Her gaze swept over my mud-splattered old jacket, my dirt-caked work boots, and finally landed on my face. Her eyes felt like they had hooks, scraping over my skin inch by inch. She let out a laugh, her voice hoarse from the alcohol and laced with a sharp, indescribable edge. Leo Foster. So it really is you. She teetered toward me on her expensive high heels, completely ignoring the uneven dirt ground beneath her feet. She got closer, her boozy breath nearly hitting my face. You're good at hiding, aren't you? Huh. Made me work to find you. She was too close. The invasive mixture of high-end perfume and alcohol was overwhelming. I instinctively took a half step back, my brow furrowed. Sarah, you're drunk. How did you find this place? My internal alarm bells were screaming. Little River Hollow was in the middle of nowhere. How had she found me so precisely? How did I find you? Sarah took another step closer, her heel sinking into the soft dirt. She didn't care. She just tilted her chin up, her posture aggressive. Did you forget about Maria? Did you forget who tipped you off that I was going for my master's, then my PhD, so you could hurry up and deal with the trouble I was becoming? Her voice rose, thick with sarcasm and years of pent-up resentment. You thought deleting a contact and selling a rundown diner meant you could just vanish. Leo, you underestimate me. And you seriously underestimate how long someone you invested in and then threw away like trash can hold a grudge. Her accusations were like cold needles, piercing the calm I had so carefully constructed. Maria, the kind diner owner. I had indeed asked her to let me know if Sarah had any major news during her PhD studies. I had noticed the way Sarah was looking at me, her gratitude mixed with something far heavier, something I couldn't bear. I didn't want to be a burden or an anchor in her life. I never thought Maria would remember, let alone that Sarah would follow the trail all the way here. Sarah, what's in the past? I started trying to get her to calm down, but she cut me off sharply. The past. Sarah was like a lit fuse, her voice turning shrill, the moisture in her eyes threatening to spill over. You think you can just erase it all with what's in the past? Do you have any idea what it felt like after you sent that text? You deserve a better future. Thanks for helping with my thesis. And then just deleted me. Phone number disconnected. The diner sold. You just vanished. I was standing there in front of that empty diner like an idiot, holding the final draft of your thesis that I'd perfected for you. Do you know how I felt? Huh. Her chest heaved, and a button on her trench coat popped open from her agitated movements. The golden light of the sunset fell on her face, illuminating the stubborn, unshed tear at the corner of her eye. Beneath the anger was a deep, buried hurt, like an old scar being brutally ripped open. Faced with her torrent of questions, I was speechless. Cutting ties back then was my misguided attempt at doing what was best for her, trying not to let her feel shackled to a nobody like me out of gratitude or something else. I truly hadn't considered her feelings, or rather, I had deliberately ignored them. You what? Sarah gave me no chance to explain. It was as if years of pent-up emotions had finally found an outlet, and fueled by alcohol, she let it all pour out. Leo, you're a complete and utter bastard, a selfish coward. You help people just to satisfy your own sick little investment thrill. You get your kicks watching someone's life change because of you, and then you just get to gracefully exit stage left and hide away to enjoy your damn freedom. Did you ever think about the person you helped? Did you ever consider if they even wanted your kind of help? She grew more agitated as she spoke, her voice trembling with a sob, her body swaying from the emotional turmoil. Her beautiful eyes were locked on me, the fire in them threatening to burn me to a crisp. Sarah, calm down. Seeing her teetering, I instinctively reached out to steady her. You're drunk, come inside. The moment my hand touched her arm, she flinched as if electrocuted, violently shaking my hand off. The force was surprising, filled with a reckless strength. Don't touch me, she shrieked, and using the momentum of pushing me away, she lunged at me. Caught completely off guard, I stumbled back, my spine slamming hard against the cold stone edge of the well. A dull pain shot through me, and she was on me like a furious, desperate animal, her hands grabbing the collar of my jacket, her boozy breath hot against my neck and jaw. Running. Her voice was right next to my ear, seething, filled with a near-maniacal obsession and a thick, suffocating pain. You were pretty quick to run back then. Huh. Once I was done editing your thesis, once you'd squeezed out all my value, you just deleted me and ran? Leo, life doesn't work that way. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Her body was pressed against mine, shockingly hot and soft, the scent of alcohol and perfume completely enveloping me. I tried to push her away, but the moment my hands touched her shoulders, she clung to me even tighter like a vine. What do you want? I was pinned against the well, unable to move. My voice hardened. What do I want? Sarah looked up, her drunken eyes meeting mine. Her exquisite face was inches from mine, her red lips curving into a tipsy, mischievous smile. But deep in her eyes, a complex storm of emotions I couldn't decipher was brewing. Anger, hurt, and a desperate, all-or-nothing resolve. Payback. Before the word had even finished echoing, the hand on my collar yanked down hard. At the same time, she stood on her toes, and her hot, alcohol-laced lips crashed onto mine. A messy, brutal collision. It wasn't a kiss. It was an exorcism, a branding, a savage declaration. Our teeth knocked together painfully. The overpowering taste of alcohol flooded my senses. My mind went completely blank with a deafening buzz. My body instinctively fought back, trying to push her off, but she was like an octopus clinging to me with surprising strength, a desperate, reckless frenzy in her movements. In the chaos, my struggling hands seemed to brush against the soft curve of her waist under her coat, which only made her let out a muffled whimper and press herself even more forcefully against me. Her kiss had no technique, only a brutish plundering and a scent of hopeless, all in despair. The last ray of sunlight sank below the horizon. The yard plunged into darkness, save for the dim yellow light spilling from the main room, casting a small, blurry patch on the ground. The sounds of our ragged breaths, the rustle of clothing, and Sarah's muffled, drunken sobs filled the silent yard. The cold stone of the well was at my back. The hot, soft body of a woman was in front of me, a world of ice and fire. My last shred of sanity screamed at me to stop this absurd farce. I took a deep breath and, with all my strength, grabbed her shoulders and shoved her away from me. Sarah stumbled back several steps, her high heels slipping on the muddy ground, nearly causing her to fall. She caught herself on the old persimmon tree, panting heavily, her chest rising and falling dramatically. Her lips were swollen and red, her hair stuck in messy strands to her sweaty cheeks. Her eyes were hazy and unfocused, as if she had exhausted all her energy, or perhaps as if she was shocked by her own actions. The yard was filled with the sound of our heavy breathing, echoing in the gathering dusk. The air was thick with alcohol, a lingering intimacy, and a cold, heavy awkwardness. Sarah, I wiped my mouth. I could still taste her lipstick and the faint, metallic tang of blood. My voice was tight with suppressed anger and helplessness. Are you insane? She leaned against the persimmon tree and looked up, her unfocused eyes finding me. She stared for several long seconds, and then, without any warning, her body went limp, sliding down the trunk of the tree until she was in a heap on the cold ground. Her head lolled to the side. She had passed out completely. I stood frozen, watching Sarah curled up and unconscious under the persimmon tree. The chill from the well seemed to seep into my bones. The night wind rustled the dead leaves on the ground, sending them skittering past her disheveled hair. The strong smell of alcohol filled the cold air. This was a nightmare. Just leave her there. The late autumn dew was enough to make someone seriously ill. Bring her inside. The whole situation was bizarre and promised endless complications. I rubbed my throbbing temples and finally let out a sigh of resignation. I bent down, carefully avoiding her expensive coat, slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her back, and lifted her into my arms. She was heavier than I expected, her soft body radiating a surprising amount of heat. Her head rested limply in the crook of my shoulder, her warm, boozy breath tickling my neck. I held her as steadily as I could, stepping over the scattered twigs and leaves, and carried her into the main room. A single bare bulb cast a dim yellow light. I laid her down on my bed, which was just a simple wooden plank with an old cotton quilt. She whimpered softly in her sleep, her brow furrowed in discomfort. I straightened up and looked at her. Her exquisite makeup was smudged, her long lashes casting restless shadows on her cheeks, her lips still swollen. Stripped of her conscious aggression and expensive armor, she looked fragile and disturbingly familiar, like the girl who had turned pale with fright after breaking a plate in the diner all those years ago. The thought was fleeting, replaced by a deeper sense of helplessness. Trouble. This was colossal trouble. I grabbed a clean, thin blanket from a nearby chair and haphazardly draped it over her. I walked to the other side of the room, dragged an old wicker chair to the doorway, and sat down. The night's chill poured in through the open door. I lit a cigarette. Through the swirling smoke, I watched the sleeping figure on the bed, and my future felt like a chaotic mess. It was a sleepless night. Sarah slept deeply, occasionally murmuring something unintelligible, her tone plaintive. I leaned back in the wicker chair, smoking one cigarette after another, my mind a jumble. The memories I had deliberately sealed away were now bubbling to the surface because of her. The way her face lit up when she told me she'd gotten into the graduate program. The focused look on her face as she stayed up late editing the thesis I barely cared about but needed to graduate. And finally, the sense of smug relief I'd felt after sending that last text and blocking her. It all seemed so stupid and cruel now. Just before dawn, the ashtray was overflowing. I dozed off, my head lolling back against the chair. In a half-awake state, I thought I heard a faint stirring from the bed. My eyes snapped open. Gray light was filtering through the tattered paper on the windows. Sarah was sitting up, the blanket pulled around her waist. She was rubbing her temples with one hand, clearly suffering from a hangover. Her other hand, however, was hesitantly, carefully, pulling down the collar of her cashmere sweater, her head bowed as she peered inside. She must have felt my gaze, because she looked up and our eyes met. The air froze. Her expression shifted rapidly from hung-over confusion to bewilderment at her surroundings, and finally, as she saw me sitting in the chair by the door, exhausted and smoking, the memories seemed to rush back. Her face went from pale to flushed, settling on a complex mask of shock, mortification, and disbelief. Her eyes darted down to her own clothes, intact but wrinkled, then back to the inside of her collar. Like she'd been burned, she quickly pulled the sweater back up, covering any exposed skin. Then, when her beautiful eyes met mine again, they were blazing with a furious, accusatory fire. "Leo." Her voice was hoarse from the hangover, but sharp with the outrage of someone who'd been violated. Her finger trembled as she pointed to her own collarbone, an area completely covered by her sweater. What did you do to me? You hurt me." The early morning light was cold and clear, casting mottled patches on the uneven dirt floor of the room. The air was still thick with the stale smell of last night's alcohol and an unspeakable awkwardness. Sarah's accusation, "You hurt me," landed like a red-hot brand in the quiet room. Her fingers clutched the collar of her cashmere sweater so tightly they turned white, as if she were trying to strangle the soft fabric. Her eyes, now brimming with rage and humiliation, were fixed on me. The emotions swirling in them were too complex. There was the shock of violation, the fog of a hangover, and something deeper, something she herself probably didn't recognize. I was still in the wicker chair, the exhaustion from a sleepless night and the sting of nicotine making my temples throb. Looking at her, the memory of being pinned against the well, the painful clash of our teeth, the cloying sweetness of her lipstick mixed with blood, all came rushing back. I took a long drag from my cigarette, let the harsh smoke fill my lungs, and then slowly exhaled, trying to quell my own rising irritation. "What did I do to you?" My voice was raspy from the smoke, tinged with an almost absurd calmness. "Dr. Jenkins, maybe you should try to remember who it was that showed up here blind drunk, kicked my door in, and then launched herself at me like a cannonball, biting and clawing." My gaze met her burning glare without flinching, and I deliberately let my eyes sweep over her expensive trench coat, now stained with mud and wrinkled. If I had actually wanted to do something, my tone became deliberately cold and mocking. "Do you really think you'd be sitting there fully clothed, just feeling sore?" I emphasized the words "feeling sore," my gaze pointedly flicking to the collar she was clutching so defensively. Sarah's face flushed in even deeper shade of red, the color spreading down her neck. She was clearly struggling to piece together fragments of the previous night, but the alcohol had erased most of the details. My blunt words were like a splash of cold water, causing the anger in her eyes to waver, replaced by a deeper, more complex mortification. She instinctively glanced down inside her collar again, as if to confirm something, then shot her head back up. Her gaze was still defiant, but her confidence was visibly shaken. "Well, you still shouldn't have," she stammered, tried to regain her footing, but her voice was weak and dry. "I was drunk. Do the words and actions of a drunk person even count? You just let me do that." She seemed to be blaming her own aggressive actions on my inaction. "Let you?" I almost laughed, stubbing out my cigarette and standing up. The combination of sleep deprivation and being falsely accused made my voice hard. "Sarah, you were as strong as a young bull last night. I couldn't push you off. If I hadn't been worried you'd freeze to death in the yard after you passed out, why the hell would I have bothered carrying you in here? I was more worried you'd throw up on my bed." I pointed to the shabby wooden bed and the thin blanket covering her. "And now you wake up and turn the tables on me?" My words came out in a rapid-fire burst, leaving her speechless. She opened her mouth to argue, but found she had nothing to say. Hazy snippets of the night before seemed to be coalescing in her mind. The loud crash of the door, the cold stone of the well, the clean, soapy scent of a man mixed with faint tobacco, and her own desperate, angry biting. Her face paled, then flushed again. Her eyes darted around, finally turning away in frustration. She rubbed her throbbing temples and muttered, "My head hurts so much." The atmosphere settled into a strange standoff. She sat on my bed like a child who'd done something wrong, but was too proud to admit it, nursing her headache. I leaned against the doorframe, looking at the crooked, pathetic gate, mentally calculating the hassle of getting it fixed. After a long moment, she spoke again, her voice much lower, tinged with a reluctant resignation. "Is there any water?" I sighed, accepting my fate. I went to the kitchen, heated some water in the old aluminum kettle, found a relatively clean enamel mug, and poured her half a cup of warm water, stirring in a spoonful of honey from a glass jar. I brought it back to her. "Here, for the hangover." Sarah glanced at me, hesitated, but took the mug. Her fingertips touched the warm sides. She held it in both hands and took small sips of the sweet liquid. The warmth seemed to soothe her frayed nerves a little, but her brow remained furrowed, whether from the headache or a troubled mind. I couldn't tell. "How did you know I was here?" I sat back down in the wicker chair, breaking the silence. This was the question that bothered me most. Little River Hollow was too remote. Why would a brilliant, up-and-coming scientist with a golden future waste her precious time tracking me down for revenge? Sarah held the mug, her fingers tracing its rim, her eyes lowered. "I told you, Maria." Her voice was flat. "After you disappeared, I went to see her. She wouldn't tell me anything at first, just that you told her to make sure I focused on my studies and not to look for you. Later," she paused, choosing her words, "I graduated. I got a job. I guess you could say I've had some success. I went to see her again, spent a long time just talking with her. She finally relented. She said your family was from Vermont, somewhere near a place called Riverbend Creek. She wasn't sure of the exact town, but she remembered you mentioning it once." She looked up at me, her eyes complex. "There's more than one town in this area with a Riverbend Creek in its name." I checked maps, asked around. It took time. I had a conference in a neighboring state this month. After it ended, I rented a car, put Riverbend Creek into the GPS, and just started asking around, village by village. Her tone was matter of fact, but the dedication and effort behind it were immense. Was it worth it? I looked at her, voicing my genuine confusion. "Just to settle a score over a deleted contact. Sarah, you're Dr. Jenkins now. You have an incredible future ahead of you. You're managing multi-million-dollar grants. Why waste your time on someone who's been out of your life for years? I thought time would have diluted everything. I'll be the judge of whether it was worth it." Sarah's voice suddenly sharpened, like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. She set the mug down with a soft thud, her gaze burning into me. "Leo, do you really think that your little bit of money back then, your so-called help, gave me a chance and you got to make a clean getaway, and I was just supposed to be eternally grateful and obediently follow the better future you planned for me? That I should just think of you as some benevolent symbol and we'd never see each other again?" Her words came quickly, filled with a suppressed agitation. "You're wrong. So wrong. You have no idea what you did for me back then. It wasn't just about the money. It was the first time I felt like the world wasn't just a cold, hard place. That it wasn't all about being used and exploited. That someone would actually extend a hand with no strings attached. You pulled me out of the swamp, gave me a chance to breathe, to look up at the sky. And then what? Just when I wanted to get closer to you, to show you that I could be a source of strength for you too, you threw a bucket of ice water on me and vanished without a word. Who gave you the right to decide what's good for me? Who are you to think your help was what I wanted? Her eyes were red again, her voice trembling with a sob, but this time she held back the tears, just glaring at me, her chest heaving. Her look was an indictment, full of hurt, and a deep, years-long sense of betrayed trust and dependence. I was pinned by her questions, speechless. My self-righteous act of doing what was best for her was, in her words, a condescending act of charity and a cruel abandonment. For the first time, I clearly understood how deep a wound my seemingly clean break had left. The room fell silent again, filled only with Sarah's ragged breathing. The sky outside had fully brightened. I could hear the faint sounds of early rising villagers and roosters crowing. After a long time, so long that the light in the room had become bright and clear, illuminating the tear tracks on her stubborn face, she took a deep breath, as if making a decision. She wiped her face with her sleeve and swung her legs off the bed. She was still a bit unsteady from the hangover, but she stood up straight. Without looking at me, she walked toward the door. Her expensive heels left clear imprints in the dirt floor. She went to the persimmon tree and picked up the designer handbag she had dropped there last night, brushing off the dust. I thought she was leaving. A part of me was inexplicably relieved, though the broken gate was a reminder that my troubles were far from over. However, with her handbag in tow, Sarah didn't head for the gate. Instead, she turned and, with an air of absolute certainty, walked straight into the small room next to the main one, my bedroom and study. "Hey, you!" I started to object. Sarah ignored me completely. She stood in the doorway of the small room and surveyed its contents. A narrow single bed, an old desk piled with books and clutter, my hiking backpack in the corner. The room was small, almost cramped. She frowned, clearly unimpressed. Then, she did something that left me utterly stunned. She tossed her handbag onto the desk with a thud. And then, she started unbuttoning her trench coat. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I rushed over, my voice cracking. She had already unbuttoned the coat. She slipped it off, draped the expensive garment over the back of the desk chair, revealing the equally high-quality cashmere sweater underneath. Then, as if she owned the place, she started looking around for something. "Do you have a clean towel? And a toothbrush?" She finally looked at me. Her tone as casual as if she were at a hotel reception desk. "I stink of booze. It's disgusting. I need to take a shower." She even lifted her sleeve to her nose and wrinkled it in disgust. I was completely floored. "A shower? You want a shower here?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Sarah, get this straight. This is my house. And besides," I pointed to the broken gate. "You broke the gate. You need to pack up, and I'll find someone to take you back to town. Find a hotel." "The gate's broken?" Sarah raised an eyebrow, as if just noticing. She walked to the doorway, glanced at the pathetic-looking gate, and said dismissively, "Oh, I guess I kicked a little too hard. How much? I'll pay for it." As she spoke, she actually pulled a thick luxury brand wallet from her handbag on the desk. Judging by its thickness, it was stuffed with cash. She held the wallet and looked at me, her expression a perfect picture of any problem that can be solved with money is not a problem, with a faint hint of provocation. "Name your price. This isn't about the money." I felt my temples start to throb again, a surge of anger rising. "Sarah, what the hell do you want? Wasn't last night's drunken rampage enough? This is the countryside. It's not your lab or a five-star hotel. There's no water heater. You want a shower, you have to heat water on the stove and use a bucket. And this is the only bedroom in the house. Oh, heat water? Then you'd better get to it." Sarah seemed to have completely ignored the latter part of my rant, seizing only on the words heat water. She continued, "Where's the bucket?" "Oh, that red plastic one in the yard. Looks okay." And with that, she actually started walking toward the yard, heading straight for the red plastic bucket I used for watering the garden. I watched, utterly dumbfounded, as this woman in a $1,000 sweater and high heels squatted down to pick up a mud-caked plastic bucket. The scene was so absurd it took my breath away. I strode over and snatched the bucket from her hand. "Sarah," I practically growled through gritted teeth. "Will you stop this? I give up. I was wrong, okay? I shouldn't have deleted you and vanished. I apologize, a sincere apology. I'm sorry. Are you happy now? Can you please just take your wallet, get in your rental car, and leave me alone?" Sarah didn't get angry that I'd taken the bucket. She just stood up and dusted off her hands. She looked at my exasperated face, and a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. There was no triumph in it, just a kind of sly satisfaction, like a plan coming together. An apology? She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "Leo, do you really think I drove all this way and kicked down your door just to hear a meaningless 'I'm sorry'?" She took a step closer. The lingering smell of alcohol had faded, replaced by her own clean, sharp scent. Her gaze was direct and piercing, as if it could see right through my calm facade. "Let me tell you something." Her voice was quiet but carried an undeniable force. "Last night, whether you admit it or not, it happened." Her fingertip, through her sweater, lightly tapped her collarbone, the very spot she had accused me of hurting this morning. "This is the evidence." Her tone was absolute. "When I, Sarah Jenkins, do something, I see it through to the end. And more importantly, I take responsibility." She locked her eyes on mine, her words slow and clear. "You invested in me back then. Now, it's my turn to take responsibility for you." Responsibility? For me? I was so stunned by her twisted logic that I couldn't find a single word to say. As for a place to stay, she looked around the dilapidated yard and the old house, her gaze landing on the crooked gate. "The broken gate is perfect. Saves me the trouble of kicking it in next time." She turned back to me, a gentle smile on her face, but the light in her eyes was like a hawk locking onto its prey. "I like this place. It's quiet. Good for recuperating." And she paused, her gaze sweeping over the newly sprouted seedlings in my garden patch before returning to my face, her smile deepening with a triumphant certainty. "I quit my job." Sarah's voice was quiet, almost relaxed, as if announcing a victory. But the words hit me like a boulder dropped into a still pond, sending out ripples of utter absurdity. Quit her job. The brilliant Dr. Jenkins, who was working on a major national research project, who had access to millions in grant money, whose future was dazzlingly bright. She quit to come to my rundown hovel with no water heater and declare she was going to take responsibility for me. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. I stood there, frozen, the muddy red bucket still in my hand, a wave of incredulous heat rushing to my head, a buzzing sound in my ears. What did you say?" My voice was as dry as sandpaper. "Sarah, get a grip. This isn't funny. People would kill for your job." "I'm perfectly clear-headed." Sarah's expression was calm, even relieved, as if a heavy burden had been lifted. She looked at me, her eyes free of their earlier aggression, filled only with a stubborn clarity. "Before last night, I might have hesitated, but when I kicked down that door and saw you standing here." Her gaze swept over the neglected yet budding yard, my mud-stained jacket, and finally settled on my eyes. I knew I'd come to the right place, and I made my decision. She took a step closer. The early morning chill seemed to retreat from the determined heat radiating from her. "The lab was great, the project was meaningful, the money was good," she said, her tone even as if stating fact about someone else. "But every day, I'd be staring at cold instruments and data, and all I could think about was this rundown yard, about the man who once gave me a hot meal and a chance to study in peace, and then ran away like a coward. I wondered where he was hiding, living out his so-called peaceful retirement." She gave a self-deprecating smirk. "Leo, you underestimated the interest your investment accrued. It can't be measured in money. It was like a seed that grew into a massive tree, its roots all tangled up in my heart. If I didn't dig it up and see it clearly, I could never really move on." "So you quit your job and came here?" I couldn't wrap my head around her logic. "Sarah, you're throwing away your future. Do you have any idea what you're doing?" "My future?" Sarah suddenly laughed, a laugh tinged with scorn and a strange freedom. "I'll define my own future. I used to climb so desperately because I wanted to prove myself To you, to everyone who looked down on me. Now, I've proven enough. She spread her hands in a surprisingly casual gesture. The grant money is more than enough for me to retire peacefully many times over. With the rest of my life, I want to try living differently. For example, right here, she pointed to the dirt at her feet. I want to figure some things out and get some things back. Get things back? I saw the stubborn, determined light rekindle in her eyes, and my internal alarms went off again. This woman was insane. Absolutely insane. Her idea of responsibility was clearly not what it sounded like. No, I refused flatly, slamming the plastic bucket down. This humble temple is too small for a goddess like you. The gate is broken, and I'm sending you on your way. I turned to go back inside and get my phone to call for a car. Leo, Sarah's voice rang out behind me, sharp and commanding. I stopped but didn't turn around. You just trying to make me leave? Her voice was quiet, but it drilled into my ears. I kicked the door in once, I can do it again. And again. You fix it, I'll break it. Or, her tone turned slyly threatening. I could call Maria right now. Tell her I found you. And that last night. Well, what do you think Maria would do? Don't you think she'd get on the next bus to come see for herself? Her health isn't what it used to be. What if the trip? Sarah, I spun around, furious. That's low. I learned from the best, Sarah said, crossing her arms and looking at me with an infuriatingly innocent smile. All's fair in love and war. Wasn't that the first lesson you taught me, Professor Foster? See an opportunity and seize it. I was speechless, looking at her face, which screamed, I'm staying, and there's nothing you can do about it. A profound sense of powerlessness washed over me. This woman was 100 times more difficult than Victoria. At least Victoria played by rules, made deals. Sarah, when she set her mind on something, she was relentless and would stop at nothing. What do you want? I asked, the words ground out from between clenched teeth. Simple. Sarah held up a finger, her smile bright. First, I'm staying for a while. As for where? She looked around. That little room of yours looks fine. It's a bit of a mess, but we can clean it up. That's my storage room. I protested. Exactly. It needs to be cleaned, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Second, I need basic necessities. Clean sheets and blankets, a towel, a toothbrush. Oh, and most importantly, hot water. I need a shower. Now, immediately. She wrinkled her nose and sniffed her sleeve again, her tone a mix of petulance and command. I can't stand smelling like this. Go heat the water. I looked at her, feeling like I was being roasted over an open fire. I couldn't make her leave. I couldn't win an argument. And she had Maria as a trump card. A huge sense of absurdity and the foreboding feeling of being dragged into a vortex of chaos pressed down on me. We stood in a standoff for several seconds. Sarah just watched me, her arms crossed, her expression clearly saying, Go on, let's see who gives in first. Finally, with a deep sigh of defeat, I bent down, picked up the damned red plastic bucket, and stalked off toward the woodshed next to the kitchen. I began splitting firewood. My movements were rough, sending wood chips flying. Watching my angry back, a sly, triumphant smile curved Sarah's lips. She didn't say another word. Instead, she turned and actually began to inspect the cluttered little room. It was filled with old farm tools, scraps of wood, and several dusty cardboard boxes. She wrinkled her nose and, carefully avoiding the dust on the floor, began dragging the useless junk outside. And so, on that late autumn morning, a bizarre scene unfolded in the little yard in Riverbend Creek. A chic urban professional in an expensive cashmere sweater and high heels was clumsily hauling scrap metal out of a shed. On the other side of the yard, a sullen man in a worn-out jacket was furiously swinging an axe, taking out all his frustration on the innocent logs. The rhythmic thud of the axe and the scraping sound of junk being dragged across the dirt floor broke the village's morning quiet. The chickens next door at Brenda's started clucking nervously. Life, now commandeered by Sarah, began to move at a pace Leo could no longer control. That small, cluttered storage room was miraculously cleared out. She deemed his squeaky old cot unacceptable and, with a single phone call to town, had a brand new ergonomic mattress, premium bedding, and even a simple fabric wardrobe delivered by a small truck that afternoon. The delivery guy looked utterly baffled by the sight of this dilapidated yard and the impeccably dressed woman directing him. The hot water situation was even more absurd. Sarah refused to live the primitive life of bucket showers. After inspecting the wood-fired stove and the well pump, she made another call. They built a small, tiled basin in a corner of the kitchen, connected by pipes to the large cauldron on the stove, and installed a hand-crank pressure pump at the well. The system was simple. Heat a large pot of water on the stove, scoop the hot water into the basin, and mix it with cold water pumped from the well. It was still rustic, but it was an upgrade. Watching the workers, I stood in the yard, my temples throbbing. Money. This was all money. The bedding, the wardrobe, this little plumbing project. It cost enough for me to live comfortably here for years. Sarah, could you please not be so extravagant? I tried to reason with her. I don't need all this. I do, she said without looking up from where she was supervising the installation of the pump handle. Quality of life is a basic human right. Besides, it's my money. Why are you so worried? She finally turned, a teasing glint in her eye. Don't worry, I won't touch the $2 million retirement fund you sold yourself for. I was so choked with anger I could barely breathe. I turned and went to furiously weed the garden. The physical renovations were just the beginning. Sarah invaded every aspect of my life with tyrannical force. Surprisingly, she was an excellent cook, efficient, precise, and creative. But her standards for ingredients were ridiculously high. The few green shoots in my garden were beneath her notice. Leo, the vegetables in this garden are malnourished, underdeveloped, and will taste terrible, she announced, standing with her hands on her hips like a general surveying her troops. And there's no variety. Where are the tomatoes? The cucumbers, the lettuce? We're planting all of them. And so, my garden underwent an unprecedented crop diversification and scientific cultivation. Sarah procured seeds and seedlings from who knows where, along with bags of organic fertilizer. She even printed out detailed planting schedules and taped them to the wall, specifying watering days, fertilizing times, and when to set up trellises. She was a relentless supervisor, inspecting the garden daily. If she caught me slacking off or not following her scientific protocols, she would call me out without mercy. Leo, you didn't till this row deep enough. The roots won't be able to spread. Too much water. You have to let it dry out a bit between waterings. These seedlings are too close together. Pull 2 of them out. I'd stand there with my hoe, watching her crouch by the garden bed, poking the soil with her slender, clean fingers, and I'd feel a sense of profound disillusionment. The brilliant Dr. Jenkins, who designed complex systems in a top-tier lab, was now obsessed with micromanaging my vegetable patch. Even more unbearable was her schedule management. I was used to sleeping in, staying up late, sunbathing, and fishing, living life on my own terms. Sarah became a human alarm clock and warden. Leo, it's 7 a.m. Get up. The early bird gets the worm. Leo, it's noon. The sun is perfect. Take the blankets outside to air out. Leo, stop lying around. Come for a walk by the river with me. A body in motion stays in motion. Leo, it's 10 p.m. Lights out. Staying up late is bad for your liver. Her constant nagging gave me a headache. I felt like a schoolboy being bossed around. Resistance was futile. She would either stare you down with her bright, intense eyes, armed with facts and scientific reasoning about circadian rhythms and healthy living until you surrendered, or she would resort to direct action, like ripping my blanket off on a cold morning, shocking me awake with the frigid air. Sarah, are you crazy? I'd yell, shivering. You're the one with the problem. A healthy routine is the foundation of a long life, she'd retort, hands on her hips, a hint of mischievous triumph on her face. Our war was constant. We argued about the garden layout, about what to have for dinner, about bedtime, even about whether to prune the old persimmon tree. She was logical, sharp-tongued, and unyielding. I was constantly on the losing end, often left fuming but helpless. The days passed in this chaotic, bickering rhythm. The late autumn chill deepened, but the vegetables in the garden, under Sarah's scientific management, thrived with an unseasonable vitality. On the surface, I was still resistant, still saw her as a massive, heaven-sent pain in the neck. But deep down, something was quietly changing. For instance, when she insisted on learning how to build a tomato trellis and ended up with mud all over her hands and a black smudge on her cheek, looking both clumsy and incredibly earnest in one of my old, worn-out shirts. I'd have a flash of déjà vu, seeing the girl who once carefully wiped tables in the diner. And although she complained about my cooking, whenever I brought back a few small fish from the river, she'd get excited about figuring out the best way to cook them, and the fish soup she'd serve would be exquisite. While drinking it, she'd squint her eyes like a satisfied cat and sometimes grudgingly admit, "Well, the fish is fresh." And sometimes, late at night, I'd get up for a drink of water and see the light on in her little room. I'd push the door open to find her curled up in her new bed, her laptop glowing, the screen filled with complex diagrams and lines of code. She'd be completely absorbed, her brow furrowed in concentration. In those moments, the bossy, unreasonable Sarah of the daytime would vanish, replaced by a focused, brilliant scientist. I would quietly back out, leaving a small night light on for her. This contradictory feeling grew stronger. The annoyance was real. My quiet pond had been disrupted by a vibrant, cannonballing stone. But the stagnant water of my life had also been stirred into motion. A long-lost feeling of being alive, full of hustle and bustle, was quietly growing amidst the chaos. I deliberately ignored this feeling, continuing to bicker with her daily, trying to annoy her into leaving. Until that afternoon. The sky was overcast, a cold, fine rain was falling. It was perfect weather for sleeping. I was wrapped in my blanket, fast asleep, when I felt someone shaking me. "Leo, wake up! Wake up!" It was Sarah's voice, sharp with urgency. I grumbled and rolled over, pulling the blanket over my head. "Go away. It's raining," meant for sleeping. "Sleeping, we have a problem." Sarah's voice grew louder, and with an undeniable force, she ripped the blanket off me. The cold air hit me, and I jolted awake, sitting up in a rage. "Sarah, what is your problem now? Look." She ignored my anger and shoved her phone in my face. The screen showed a local news alert, the headline stark and alarming. "Breaking. Major landslide on mountain road between Riverbend County and City. Multiple vehicles buried. Road closed. Rescue efforts underway." My heart dropped. There were only 2 roads out of the county, and this winding mountain road was the more direct one. Sarah's rental car was parked at the edge of the village. She had just been talking about wanting to go into the city to buy a few things. "Your car." I blurted out, my voice tight. "The car's fine, it's here," Sarah said quickly, her fingers swiping through the news story, her face grim. "But look at the time. The slide happened around 2 p.m. Maria took the bus to the city this afternoon to see her daughter. She takes the bus that runs that route." Maria? The name was like a lightning bolt, shattering my sleepy haze. After my parents died, it was Maria, that kind, simple woman who had taken me in, helped me run the diner, and given me a place of refuge when I was most lost. She was like family to both of us. The horrifying images in the news report and the rising casualty count felt like ice water pouring over me. Fear seized my heart. "Her phone, call Maria's phone." My voice was unsteady, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my own phone. I tried. It's going straight to voicemail. Sarah's voice was trembling slightly. She had obviously been trying to reach her. "Call her daughter, quick." I forced myself to be calm, quickly finding the number and dialing. The ringing felt endless, each tone hammering on my frayed nerves. "Hello, Leo." The call connected. The daughter, Lily, was sobbing. "Lily, where's your mom?" "The bus she was on." I asked urgently. I can't reach her. They haven't released a passenger list yet. The rescuers say the scene is too chaotic, Mom." Her phone is off. Lily was hysterical. "Leo, I'm so scared. What do I do?" "Stay calm, Lily, stay calm." I took a deep breath, trying to sound steady. "We're coming now. You wait at home. Don't go anywhere. Let us know the second you hear anything." I hung up and looked at Sarah. We saw the same dread in each other's eyes. Outside, the cold rain fell. The situation on the mountain road was unknown, dangerous. But Maria was there. "I'm driving." Sarah didn't hesitate, turning and running outside, not even bothering to change out of her slippers. "Wait." I grabbed her arm. "It's raining. The roads are slippery. That mountain road is even more dangerous now. I'll go. You stay here and wait for news." I couldn't let Sarah risk her life. You'll go. Sarah yanked her arm free and stared at me, her eyes like daggers. Can you even drive? Do you have a license? Do you know the safest way to navigate a mountain road in a storm? Are you going to help or just get in the way? Her rapid-fire questions pinned me to the spot. She was right. I didn't even have a driver's license. I know the roads better than you. I have experience. Sarah's tone was absolute, filled with a decisive authority. You stay here. Keep the lines of communication open. Answer any calls from Lily. And get hot water, clean towels, and blankets ready, just in case. In case they rescue Maria and she needs. She didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what that "in case" meant. Sarah. I watched her thin but resolute figure in the rain, a storm of emotions churning inside me. In that moment, the bossy, unreasonable Sarah vanished, replaced by a calm, decisive, and deeply loyal woman. Stop wasting time. Every second counts. She ran into the rain without looking back, toward the black SUV she had rented. The rain instantly soaked her hair and shoulders. I stood under the eaves, watching as she expertly started the engine. The headlights cut through the gray curtain of rain. The engine roared, and the vehicle shot forward, splashing through the mud, and quickly disappeared around a bend in the road. The cold rain hit my face. I was alone in the now empty and quiet yard, the sound of the downpour filling the silence. An unprecedented sense of panic and concern gripped my heart, not just for Maria, but for the figure who had just plunged headfirst into the dangerous storm. I spun around and rushed back inside, clumsily starting to boil water, grabbing towels and blankets. My mind was a mess, filled with the image of Sarah's determined back and Maria's kind, smiling face. Time crawled by. The phone on the table was silent. I paced back and forth, my eyes glued to the muddy track leading out of the village, hoping to see the beam of headlights at any moment. The rain grew heavier, the sky darker. Anxiety was a tightening vine around my chest. I started to regret not trying harder to stop her. Just as I was about to be consumed by my anxiety, the phone screen lit up. It was Sarah. I practically lunged for it, my fingers trembling as I answered. Hello. Sarah, what's going on? Sarah's voice came through, tired and damp, but steady. I found her. Maria's okay. The heart that had been in my throat dropped back into my chest. The relief was so immense, I nearly collapsed. How is she? Is she hurt? She's okay. It's a miracle. Just minor injuries, and she's terrified. Sarah's voice was tinged with relief and lingering fear. The bus she was on was hit by the edge of the mudslide and pushed into a ditch. The doors were jammed. The rescue team just got her out. She has some scrapes on her arm and a sprained ankle, but she's conscious. We're in an ambulance on the way to the county hospital now. Thank God. Thank God. I murmured, leaning against the table for support, feeling completely drained. Do you have everything ready? Sarah asked. Yes. Hot water, towels, blankets, all ready. Good. We should be at the ER in about half an hour. Meet us there. Sarah hung up. I stood stunned for a few seconds, then sprang into action. I filled a thermos with boiling water, grabbed the blankets and towels, locked the still crooked gate, and ran out into the rain. I managed to flag down a pickup truck heading to town, paying the driver double to get me to the hospital as fast as possible. Bouncing along in the back of the truck, the cold, rainy wind whipping my face, I clutched the thermos and blankets, my mind racing. The last hour had been a nightmare. And Sarah, the woman who had, without a moment's hesitation, charged into danger, calmly found Maria and arranged everything. My perception of her shattered all previous labels. Annoying, unreasonable, crazy. She wasn't crazy. She just knew exactly what she wanted. And in a crisis, she had more courage and competence than anyone I knew. The county hospital ER was chaotic. I spotted Sarah immediately on a bench in the hallway. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her pale face, her expensive sweater and pants caked in mud. She was wearing only one slipper. The other foot was bare on the cold tile floor. She was bent over, gently wiping the mud from Maria's face and hands with a towel. Maria was leaning against her, pale and shaken, her arm bandaged, her ankle visibly swollen. When Maria saw me, she burst into tears. Leo, Sarah, Maria, it's okay. You're safe now. I rushed over, putting down the thermos and blankets. I wrapped a thick blanket around her and poured her a cup of hot water. Drink this. It'll warm you up. It was Sarah, Maria sobbed, clutching the cup. If it wasn't for her, it was so dangerous. She just ran right over, shouting my name. I looked at Sarah. She looked up, her face exhausted, her eyes red from the rain and stress, but they were incredibly bright. She gave me a weak, tired smile and went back to gently cleaning the dried mud from Maria's hair. She was so gentle, so focused. In that moment, the smell of antiseptic, the surrounding chaos, it all faded away. All I could see was this drenched, disheveled, yet luminous woman. An indescribable warmth surged through my chest, hitting me with a delayed but powerful impact. Just then, the sharp, rhythmic click of high heels echoed from the ER entrance, followed by a cold, furious female voice that shattered the fragile peace. Leo Foster, I knew I'd find you here. The voice was like a shard of ice, sharp and cold, laced with a rage that had been pushed to its limit. It cut through the ER's cacophony of antiseptic, damp earth, and anxiety. I whipped my head around. The glass doors had been shoved open with such force they slammed against the wall. And there stood Victoria Vance. She was wearing a perfectly tailored black cashmere coat that made her skin look even paler, her hair pulled back in a severe, flawless bun. Her face was etched with the fatigue of a long journey, but it was overshadowed by a stormy, furious expression. Her eyes, the same eyes that could command a boardroom, were now locked on me, burning with a cold fire, so intense they felt like they could bore holes through me. How was she here? How'd she find this place? The ER in this tiny Vermont county. Right now, a wave of pure shock seized me. The blanket in my hands felt leaden. I was frozen. Victoria's gaze stayed on my face for 3 long seconds, the cold scrutiny of her stare threatening to turn my blood to ice. Then her eyes moved slowly. They swept over Maria, huddled in her blanket, and finally, they landed on the person next to me, on Sarah, who was drenched, mud-caked, 1 foot bare, still holding a towel. Sarah had looked up at the sound of the voice. Her face was still weary and worried, but the moment she saw Victoria, her bloodshot eyes narrowed with an instant, undisguised hostility. She didn't move from her half-crouched position, but her fingers tightened on the towel. The 2 women's gazes collided in midair. It was silent, but charged with invisible sparks. One, a polished, freezing cold corporate powerhouse. The other, a disheveled but fiercely defiant academic. The contrast was stark and bizarre. Victoria's lips thinned into a pale, hard line. She took in Sarah's appearance, the easy proximity between us, the bare foot on the dirty floor, and the anger in her eyes flared, mixed with a look of utter disgust and offense. She started walking toward us, the sharp clicks of her designer heels on the linoleum floor a menacing drumbeat. She stopped a few feet away, looking down at me, her voice so cold it could freeze water. Leo, you've really outdone yourself. Her voice was quiet, but it seethed with a chilling venom. I knew you left too easily. So this was it. You already had your next mark lined up, hiding out in this godforsaken backwater to play what? Hero in some pathetic melodrama. Her eyes flicked contemptuously over Sarah's muddy clothes and bare foot, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. An interesting change of taste. You throw away a comfortable life because you prefer this. Rustic flavor? What? Was servicing one rich woman not enough? You had to go and find yourself a dirt-poor charity case. Victoria. My own anger surged, and I cut her off, my voice sharp. Watch your mouth. This isn't the place for your drama. My drama. Victoria laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. Leo, you took my money and ran off to shack up with this trash. And you have a nerve to tell me I'm causing a scene. She stabbed a finger towards Sarah. Who is she? Huh? When did you two start sneaking around? Was it while you were still with me? Is that why you agreed to the divorce so quickly? Tell me. Her accusations were ludicrous and vile. I was shaking with rage, about to retaliate, but a calm, cold voice beat me to it. Ma'am, it was Sarah. She had stood up, despite being drenched and disheveled, barefoot and slightly shorter than Victoria in her heels. Her spine was ramrod straight, her chin slightly lifted. She wasn't looking at Victoria. Her eyes were on me, her tone as matter-of-fact, as if she were stating a simple truth, but it carried an authority that instantly silenced Victoria's hysteria. So this is the famous ex-wife? The one who, after you saved her from bankruptcy with your life savings, got successful and then immediately started fooling around with her boy toy assistant, finally paying you off with $2 million like you were some homeless beggar. Sarah's voice was clear and steady, each word a cold, hard pebble dropped into the charged silence. She even tilted her head, her expression one of mild, academic curiosity. It felt like the air around us exploded. The color drained from Victoria's face. Her carefully constructed mask of cold superiority shattered. Her eyes widened, her pupils contracting as if she'd been stripped naked under a spotlight, her deepest shame exposed for all to see. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't form a word. Sarah, however, seemed oblivious to Victoria's breakdown. Her gaze finally shifted to Victoria, a faint, devastatingly effective smile playing on her lips. I see it is, she nodded gently. Amazing what a good wardrobe can do. A $10,000 coat and designer heels certainly look more respectable than begging for enough money for a bowl of soup on a street corner. That was the final blow. You, what nonsense are you spouting? Victoria finally found her voice. It was shrill, panicked, and humiliated. Leo, you told this woman about that. Have you no shame? Why so upset, Ms. Vance? Sarah's voice was laced with undisguised mockery. If you didn't want people to know, you shouldn't have done it. You can't be afraid of the truth, can you? She took a small step forward, her bare foot silent on the cold floor, yet she seemed to be standing on higher ground. Her gaze became intensely focused, pinning the pale, gasping Victoria in place. And let me correct you on a few points. Sarah's voice turned to ice. First, my relationship with Leo is none of your business. You forfeited that right when you bought your way out of your marriage. Second, he is not living off your money to support me. To be precise, she paused, her eyes flicking to me with a clear, possessive meaning. From now on, I am supporting him. She turned her gaze back to Victoria, her eyes filled with a clinical pity and merciless scorn. After all, it must be tough getting stabbed in the back by the little pet you were keeping. I hear he made off with your company's trade secrets and your entire client list. A classic tale of losing both your boy toy and your fortune. It's no wonder you're so angry. You must feel like a stray dog, running all the way out here to bark at the man who got away. Every word from Sarah was a perfectly aimed dagger, twisting into Victoria's most painful, most humiliating wounds. The assistant, stealing from her, the company in crisis. All the secrets she had desperately tried to hide were now being laid bare with brutal precision. Victoria swayed, her face a deathly gray. She stared at Sarah, her eyes filled with a horrified, venomous disbelief, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. The curious glances from onlookers now felt like needles. She finally whipped her head around to glare at me one last time. Her expression was a toxic cocktail of rage, resentment, disbelief, and a sliver of humiliated regret. Then she turned and practically fled, stumbling on her high heels, a pathetic, defeated figure disappearing out the ER doors into the cold, rainy night. A strange silence descended on the hallway. I stood there, my heart still pounding, my palms slick with sweat. I stared in the direction Victoria had gone, a complex, bitter taste in my mouth. 2 years of marriage, ending in this ugly, public spectacle. Ahem. Maria's weak cough brought me back. She looked worriedly between me and Sarah. I took a deep breath, pushing down the turmoil of emotions, and knelt to comfort her. It's okay, Maria. It's all over. Sarah knelt beside me, picking up the towel and resuming her gentle cleaning of Maria's hands. Her face was calm, as if she hadn't just verbally annihilated a woman. But as she looked down, I thought I saw the corner of her mouth twitch in a fleeting, satisfied, and fiercely proprietary smile. A nurse arrived with a gurney to take Maria for more tests. As we followed, I walked beside Sarah. I hesitated, then spoke in a low, hoarse voice. How did you know? About her company, the assistant. Sarah didn't look at me, her eyes fixed on the gurney ahead. Oh, I did some research before I came, she said, her tone as casual as if discussing the weather. Her company's troubles are an open secret in certain circles. As for the assistant, she finally glanced at me, her look saying, "Is it not obvious? What other reason would she have for letting you go so easily with so much money, unless he'd made it impossible for her to do otherwise?" I was speechless. She looked away, adding coolly, "You have terrible taste in women." Once again, I had no reply. Looking at her calm profile, the complex storm of my own emotions was suddenly replaced by a sense of resigned absurdity. This woman, what other tricks did she have up her sleeve? The test results confirmed Maria just had minor injuries and was suffering for shock. After getting her settled in a room for the night, it was already late. The rain had stopped. We walked out of the hospital into the cold night air. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her damp clothes. I took off my dry jacket and handed it to her. She looked at the jacket, then at me, and took it without a word, pulling it on. It was huge on her, enveloping her in my warmth and the faint smell of tobacco. We walked in silence toward her car. "Today, thanks," I said quietly. "Thanks for risking yourself for Maria, and thanks for defending me." She just made a small sound of acknowledgement. When we reached the car, she turned to face me, her eyes shining in the dim light of the parking lot. "Leo," she said, her voice serious. "Yeah, she was never good enough for you," Sarah said, her eyes locked on mine. "Not then, and especially not now." I was stunned, my heart giving a strange lurch. "So," she tilted her chin up with that familiar, undeniable authority, "from now on, you're my responsibility." And with that, she got into the car, closing the door with a firm thud. She started the engine, then rolled down the window, her expression shifting to one of playful command. "Well, what are you waiting for? Get in. Let's go home. It's freezing." I stood there for a moment, looking at this woman, wrapped in my old jacket, her hair a mess, yet her eyes bright as she staked her claim on me. The wind was cold, but a strange, powerful warmth was spreading through my chest. Without arguing, without hesitating, I opened the passenger door and got in. The car pulled out onto the empty county road. The heater was on full blast. Sarah drove with focused silence. Outside was the deep, rain-washed darkness, but the headlights cut a steady path forward, illuminating the road home. I knew, with absolute certainty, that everything had changed. My chaotic chapter with Victoria was over. But my chapter with Sarah, it was just beginning, and I had a sinking feeling that I was no longer the one in charge. I leaned back and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long, long time, the exhaustion I felt wasn't empty. It was a kind of weary, resigned peace. So be it. 5 years later, time flowed like the creek behind the village, quietly, but moving ever forward. A full 5 years had passed. Little River Hollow hadn't changed much, but the yard at the east end of the village was a different world. The old wooden gate was long gone, replaced by a handsome wrought iron one designed by Sarah herself. The dirt yard was paved with flagstones, the vegetable garden was twice its original size, and a large grape arbor now provided shade for a stone table and chairs. The old house had been completely renovated. New roof, new windows, hardwood floors, modern plumbing, and a small office nook with 2 high-end computers. It was a summer afternoon. Sarah, dressed in comfortable linen, was working on her laptop at the stone table, completely absorbed in a complex molecular structure on her screen. She had softened over the years, the sharp edges smoothed by motherhood, but the intensity was still there. I was sprawled in a nearby wicker lounge chair, half asleep in the sun, embodying my life's ultimate goal of blissful idleness. The peace was shattered by a dramatic sigh from a small boy hunched over his homework at another table. "This letter is so hard to write." He fiddled with his eraser, then coughed loudly for attention. Sarah's head snapped up. "Max Foster, is your alphabet homework done?" "I'm doing it," Max whined. "But the letter G won't listen to me." Sarah went over and peered at his workbook. The letter G was indeed a drunken squiggle. "Max," she scolded, "what is this supposed to be?" "A deflated balloon. If you don't fix it, no ice cream this afternoon." Max's face crumpled. "But your G is too perfect," he mumbled. "Mine has more personality." I was fully awake now and wandered over. "I don't know, Sarah," I said, feigning seriousness. This has an abstract, postmodern quality, far more artistic than your factory standard version. Max giggled, immediately siding with me. See, Dad gets it. It's art. Sarah shot me a death glare. Leo, if you don't shut up, you can go weed the entire back garden. I surrendered immediately. After a few more failed attempts to teach Max, Sarah's patience finally snapped. She slammed the pencil down. Max, honestly, who did you get your brains from? From his workbook and my lounge chair, Max and I answered in perfect, unhesitating unison, pointing at each other, him, /her. Max, caught in the crossfire, promptly burst into tears. Wow. I must have been adopted from the town dump. Sarah and I exchanged a look of mutual defeat. While she comforted our son with promises of double ice cream, I felt a familiar sense of contentment. The yard was filled with a chaotic, vibrant warmth. Later, Sarah returned her laptop, frowning at the screen. I'm stuck, she muttered. The energy calculation is off, and I've rebuilt the model 3 times. I watched her, then said casually, do you want me to open up another level of processing priority on the Odyssey supercluster for you? They just upgraded their server arrays. Sarah's head shot up, her eyes wide with shock. The Odyssey? How do you have access to that? It's a national supercomputing. I just shrugged, fanning her with a palm leaf. Oh, it's nothing. I threw some pocket change into their seed funding round years ago. Got a small stake in the tech patents. I have an anonymous priority access channel for emergencies. Sarah stared at me, a complex mix of shock, dawning realization, and utter exasperation on her face. She didn't ask any more questions. She just took a deep breath, her fingers flying across her keyboard. Her voice was calm, but tinged with a familiar, teeth-gritted edge. Send the access codes to my email, along with the authentication protocols for the anonymous channel. On it, I said, pulling out my phone. The yard fell quiet again, save for the clicking of keys and the happy hum of a boy who had successfully negotiated for more ice cream. I looked at the brilliant, stubborn woman beside me, then at the mischievous son who was the perfect mix of us both. The empty, quiet life I thought I wanted had been invaded, overrun, and filled to the brim with a messy, wonderful, and chaotic love. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, a small smile on my lips, running away from a rich woman only to be captured by an even more formidable one. It was a strange kind of happiness. She had kicked my door down and declared, from now on, you're my responsibility. And I had a feeling she was right.